Welcome back to the Nerdy Grail, and as you can see behind me, I've got a fair few of my modern Doctor Who series steelbooks. My Series 1 steelbook, Series 2, Series 5, Series 8, the Jodie Whittaker Season 13 specials as well, because in today's video, this is going to be the third part of a 4-part series that I've been doing, where I've been ranking both my top 10 best and top 10 worst stories in both the classic and the modern era of the show. So in the first video of this series, I looked at my top 10 best classic series stories. So if you haven't checked that out, please do. And then I looked at my top 10 worst classic series stories. So again, if you haven't checked that video out, feel free after this video to go check that out, or watch those videos first and then move on to this list. Because in today's video, we are moving into the modern era of the show. So from 2005 with Christopher Eccleston, all the way up to the current era of the show with Ncuti Gatwa in 2025. So it's going to work a little bit differently to the classic series one, as there's obviously multi-part stories. Just to put it simply, if there's a multi-part story, I'm looking at it as a whole. So I'm not separating part 1 and part 2. So stories like Stolen Earth and Journey's End, I'm looking as a collective as opposed to individual parts, because they are supposed to be one whole story. Okay, so say number 10, for example, was Stolen Earth and Journey's End. They will both be in 10th position. It wouldn't be Stolen Earth in 10th and then Journey's End in 9th, if that makes sense. Okay, and I am going to do some honourable mentions, but I thought I'm going to dedicate a whole new section of the video for that. So now that we've got the general rules out the way for how this ranking is going to work, let's jump straight into my 3 honourable mentions for my top 10 best episodes for the modern series. Just like I did for the classic series, I do have 3 honourable mentions that I'd like to mention before getting into my actual top 10. So these are just stories that I really do enjoy for one reason or the other, but I couldn't quite put them into my top 10 because there is 10 stories that I think are way better than these, or I just enjoyed a little bit more. And there's going to be some stories on this list that are really going to shock you, but just bear with me and just remember, this is simply my list. Your list is going to be different to mine, and that's okay. So the first honourable mention is from season 3 with David Tennant, so his second full season as the Doctor, titled Gridlock. Yeah, I actually really enjoyed Gridlock. So the Doctor and new companion Martha Jones, well, almost new companion Martha Jones, he's travelled with her for a little while, go back to New York because he wants to show her some of the sights that he showed Rose before. But eventually he sees that he's landed in like the undercity of New York, where he wanted to be above ground. And he finds out that there's a bunch of people who are all trapped on this motorway, a never-ending motorway, just going round in circles forever, that they've been left and abandoned. But it turns out actually that the Face of Bo was actually saving them from a disaster and didn't have enough power to release them from the undercity. It's quite an interesting concept, and the Doctor gets to travel through various cars because Martha gets kidnapped by these people who were trying to escape the motorway, and they needed a certain number of passengers to enter what's known as like the fast lane so that they can get through the traffic quicker. This story also does bring back a classic series villain who at the time their story was still missing, but now you can watch the animated version of it. It brings back the Macra in a much more savage way, which is really, really interesting, but were they really needed? Not so much. They were just there so there was an extra threat. This is also the final story for the Face of Bo, as the Face of Bo does sadly die. But later in Series 3, we find out that the Face of Bo is actually Captain Jack Harkness. So that was interesting. But yeah, I quite like it, really. It also brings back Novice Haim from New Earth, the Cat Lady. So there's lots of returning characters and some great extra characters. And all the sub-characters are brilliant in this story. So I really enjoy it, and I've watched it a fair few times. The second honourable mention on this list is from season 8, so Peter Capaldi's first full season as the Doctor, and that is Flatline. Yeah, I quite like this one. So the Doctor is basically stuck inside the TARDIS as it is shrinking, and Clara is outside of the TARDIS when the TARDIS shrinks, so she has to sort of take on the mantle of the Doctor, which starts to happen a lot towards the end of Capaldi's first season. Clara sort of almost embodies the Doctor and tries to be like the Doctor a lot more, and this was the first proper example of that, which is really, really interesting. The Doctor trapped inside the TARDIS. It's a tiny little toy TARDIS, and Clara having to lead this group of humans to defend themselves against these creatures which the Doctor names the Boneless, these like graffiti drawings that are like two-dimensional and then come out and chase people and drag them under the ground and make them artwork themselves and stuff. It's really, really interesting. And you really, really feel for some of the characters. It also introduced us to Rigsy, who's a big part in Clara's eventual departure in Face the Raven, as he does return in Series 9. It is quite a fun story, and it's good to see the Doctor having to sort of put his trust in Clara a lot more, because the 12th Doctor, especially in his first season, was a bit unsure of himself, so him having to put faith in Clara was interesting. And then the final honourable mention, and this is one that might shock people, especially, nowadays with how people seem to treat Doctor Who. This one is from the Jodie Whittaker era. Yep, there is some Jodie Whittaker stories that I really enjoy. And this is a New Year's Day special, and this was after the Flux, so this is from the season 13 specials, titled Eve of the Daleks. I really like Eve of the Daleks. Simple premise and a small cast of characters. You've literally got the Doctor, Yaz and Dan, and then you've got two other main characters, and then it's just the Daleks. And they're trapped in like this time loop. And that is literally it. And they have to try and escape the time loop with the Daleks hunting them down in this claustrophobic warehouse factory thing. And it's really, really cool. And I really love the supporting cast. Aisling Bea, the comedian, she's fantastic and does a great job. I love all the characters in this. And I love the relationship that the Doctor has with Dan and Yaz in this. And the Daleks are actually really good and threatening in this story as well. And like I said, the claustrophobic feel of the corridors of this factory really helps. And I love a time loop. I love a good time loop story. So those are my 3 honourable mentions. But without further ado, it's now time to actually jump into my proper top 10 favourite or best modern Doctor Who stories, in my personal opinion, starting with number 10. Number 10 is a story that's going to shock an awful lot of people, I think, but it's actually from the 60th anniversary specials from 2023. The second one, titled Wild Blue Yonder. Now, I love the 14th Doctor. I personally think David Tennant's 14th Doctor, in my opinion, is better than the 10th Doctor himself. I know that's probably a controversial thing to say, but I generally like the more wiser version that David Tennant brings to this Doctor, now that he's had the experiences of both of the 11th, 12th and 13th Doctors, after he's had the realisation from the Timeless Child arc and the Flux causing damage to him, both physically and mentally in particular. So it's really, really interesting to see how he grows. And this is a very small cast of characters. It's literally just the Doctor and Donna for the vast majority of the episode. You do get a really lovely cameo at the end from Bernard Cribbins, Wilfred Mott again, which is lovely. And also this sets up a lot of the story arcs that we have seen now in Ncuti's era, and a lot of the mysteries that have now been solved, because this starts the story arc, in my personal opinion, of the TARDIS making really weird noises, which you find out it was Sutekh draining the TARDIS and causing damage to the TARDIS. It also has the first Susan Twist cameo, who then cameoed in every episode of Ncuti's first season until we found out what she was about. So this does set up a lot of stuff. It also starts the Gods arc, which is still going on because the Doctor sprinkles salt at the edge of the universe, which releases the Toymaker, and I believe all the other gods as well. So the events of Wild Blue Yonder are really, pivotal and important for all of New Who going forward at the moment. And I just like the relationship between the Doctor and Donna. I think it's really, really good. You have some amazing and emotional conversations between the two, especially when the fake Donna is talking to the real Doctor about the Flux, and you can see how it's really affected the Doctor, how he gets so emotional but also angry at the same time, and I really, really like that. You can see how much it's hurt him, and it's really, really good to see that. Same with Donna talking to the real Doctor about certain things as well, and how, she's had to, spent years and years without him and had to try and move on, and think that she's lost a part of her life because obviously she couldn't remember who he was. It's really, really good and a really, really deep story, and that's what I like. Now, yeah, the only thing I don't like about this story, which is why it's number 10, but I still think it's a really good story, I'm not a huge fan of the whole Mavity thing, which obviously started in this story. I do think it's a little bit weird and a little bit silly, but it is what it is. But yeah, I love Wild Blue Yonder. I actually think it is a solid story, and that's why, for me personally, it's at number 10 on my best list for modern Doctor Who. Number 9. Now, I did say that this list is probably going to shock a few people to start with, but there will be a few stories on here that I'm sure people are expecting. Yeah, number 9 is Jodie Whittaker's final story, final appearance as the Doctor, The Power of the Doctor. Now this, for me, if I'm being perfectly honest, this is the real 50th anniversary and the real 60th anniversary in particular, because obviously the 60th anniversary was the next year. But if I'm being honest, this feels more like the true 60th anniversary, because this does celebrate a lot more of both modern and classic Who than the actual 60th anniversary actually does. The 60th feels more like a Series 4 Part 2, if I'm honest. However, you've got it all in this story. You've got loads of Doctors to start with. You've got the first Doctor, played by David Bradley, the return of Peter Davison, Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, Paul McGann. Obviously, David Tennant returns in a post-regeneration scene as number 14. So we've got David Tennant. Obviously, Jodie Whittaker bows out. We've also got the Master, who sort of does this weird plot of combining the TV movie Master trying to steal the Doctor's future lives, this, that, and the other, but also combining it with stealing the Doctor's body, so the Master becomes the Doctor. So obviously, like I said, you've got the Master, played by Sacha Dhawan, who does a fantastic job. I love Sacha Dhawan. You've also got the Daleks, you've got the Cybermen, you've got the return of Vinda from Flux. The Fugitive Doctor makes an appearance in this, played by Joe Martin. You have loads of returning companions, in particular Janet Fielding and Sophie Aldred as Tegan Jovanka and Ace. Fantastic, brilliant to see them again. Some great references, especially when Sasha, so the Master, meets up with Tegan and Ace again for the first time and mocks Tegan about her Auntie Vanessa. Fantastic line, absolutely loved it. You got the return of Graham in this story as well. And there's also a council or an intervention group or community group of companions at the end of the episode as well. So you get to see more companions. Katie Manning's Joe Grant is there. Bonnie Langford's Melanie Bush is there. And obviously Mel's continued to come forward in the 60th, in season 1. And now she's going to come back probably in season 2, I believe. So we've seen Mel a lot more. We get the late, great William Russell, so Ian Chesterton, which was fantastic to see him there. Brilliant. And his little line at the end broke my heart, but I loved it. So that was really good. So it was really touching for the fans. Obviously, it's a Doctor departure. It's a companion departure, because obviously Yaz and Dan both leave in this story. You know, it's got it all. It's got references galore. And I love it as a story. I think it is fantastic. And this is the story where, for me, Jodie actually felt like the Doctor a bit. And Jodie, you did a fantastic job, in my opinion, in this story. So you're well deserved to be on this list. Coming in at number 9. Coming in at number 8, we have a two-parter, which I've combined into one whole point on this list, because I love both parts equally. And that is a story from season 6, so with the 11th Doctor, played by the brilliant Matt Smith. We have the Rebel Flesh and the Almost People. Now, I love a good doppelganger story. Doppelganger stories are like my bread and butter. I adore a doppelganger. I love like The Enemy of the World with the doppelganger of Patrick Troughton. I think it's brilliant. Meglos, I surprisingly love, with the doppelganger of the 4th Doctor. I just love a good doppelganger story. And that's what you get here. You know, you've got this factory in the middle of this island where this bunch of people, you know, are working with dangerous acids and chemicals. And obviously they have, in order to make sure they're safe, they use these doppelgangers in order to touch and handle the raw materials. But something goes wrong, a lightning storm strikes, and the doppelgangers start getting personalities and becoming a bit more independent, and so want to fight for their freedom. So you have the doppelgangers going up against the real copied versions of them. So it's really, really good. And in part 2 in particular, you get the doppelganger Doctor and Amy having to try and decipher which Doctor is the real Doctor, thinking she knows the Doctor, but the Doctor has a plan to test her faith and whether she can actually tell them apart. It's brilliant. It's really, really good. And obviously this story also sets up a core part of Series 6 as well, Amy's pregnancy, because we find out that actually Amy was actually a doppelganger herself all along and she wasn't actually there. You know, it's a really, really good and really emotional story, especially since most of the real versions of the characters actually don't make it out, and it's mostly like the doppelgangers and stuff that sort of are around. There's this one character who's a father to a son, and the real one ends up dying, and so the doppelganger has to take over his life, and it's really sad and emotional, but also really happy and sweet at the same time. I really enjoyed the Rebel Flesh and Almost People. Very dark story, very creepy story as well. The design of the ganger-like creatures, whether in flesh form, is terrifying to see. But brilliant story nonetheless. That's why it makes it onto my top 10 list. Coming in at number 8. At number 7, we have another two-parter, and this is a funny one because we've got The Stolen Earth and Journey's End. The Series 4 finale, starring David Tennant again, but this time as the 10th Doctor, as opposed to the 14th Doctor, but we also have Donna Noble again. However, this is sort of like, I'd say it's like the swan song of the original RTD era, because you have literally everything in it from the RTD era. Obviously, you've got a Dalek two-part finale, which happened in practically all of RTD's original era. You know, season 1 ended with a Dalek two-parter, season 2 had the Daleks versus the Cybermen. It was only season 3 that didn't have the Daleks as the finale, so this was like a staple of RTD. Really big. They brought back Davros for the first time in New Who, which was brilliant. Julian Bleach does a fantastic job as Davros. He's really good. Terry Malloy is still my favourite Davros, but I would say I really do enjoy Julian Bleach's performance, and he's brilliant, and I'd love to see him come back again as Davros. We also then have practically every RTD companion appear in this. Obviously, the series was building up to the return of Rose Tyler, so Billie Piper returns. Martha Jones is in it. Obviously, you've got Donna, you've got Wilf, you've got Sylvia, you've got Captain Jack, you've got Jackie Tyler, Mickey Smith, Sarah Jane Smith, you know, Gwen Cooper and Yanto are also in it from Torchwood, Luke, you know, everyone is in it. So basically anything RTD from the original era practically appears in this story. Harriet Jones appears in the story then to get killed off. You've got appearances from the Jadoon as well. There's so much. You've got a fake-out regeneration at the cliffhanger of Stolen Earth. One of the best cliffhangers of Modern Who. Not my favourite. I should do a video, actually, of my favourite cliffhangers of Modern Who. That, or Doctor Who in general, because this would be up there. Because, you know, surprising us with a regeneration, thinking, oh my goodness, how's the Doctor going to get out of this one, was really interesting. But obviously this introduces us to the Meta-Crisis Doctor, meaning that David Tennant has 3 different incarnations out there, because you've got the 10th Doctor, then you've got the Meta-Crisis Doctor, you obviously got the 14th Doctor. There's so many David Tennants. You could have a multi-Doctor story with just David Tennant. But it was really, really good. Quite grand scale, but the problem with it being so grand scale is now everything going forward you feel like the human race should know about. You know, the planet being taken across space, the planets in the sky, the Daleks invading all across the world. It's not something you forget about, but yet you get stories in Modern Who now where they don't believe aliens are real and it's all fake. I'm looking at you, Conrad from Lucky Day. It's ridiculous, but yeah. I really like Journey's End and Stolen Earth. I think it's a fantastic end to Series 4. Fantastic end to the original story of Donna, which then gets brought back up then in the 60th specials. So that's why it, hands down, had to make it onto the list. Coming in at number 7. Coming in at number 6, we have, yet again, another two-parter and another story from David Tennant, again as the 10th Doctor. This time it's from Series 2, so the 10th Doctor and Rose Tyler. The first series of the 10th Doctor, The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. This is a terrifying story. Really, really creepy, but that's what I like about it. I like a good scary story. Something that can really get your heart pumping, actually make you want to jump and hide behind the sofa. So the Doctor and Rose land on this space station, which is orbiting a black hole, and it's about to break apart and fall into the black hole, but it's just being kept afloat by some mysterious force. And there's this big pit which holds many secrets. And all the people on this base, you know, have these workers known as the Ood, because this was the first time they introduced the Ood. And I love the Ood, and I really want the Ood to come back. We haven't properly seen an Ood, like properly, since Flux. So I really would like to see an Ood again properly, and have a proper, maybe have them as a villain again. It would be interesting. But yeah, I really like the Ood. The character of Toby, if you know the character of Toby in Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit, you know how terrifying he is, how he gets possessed by the Beast, who is voiced by the amazing voice of Sutek himself, Gabriel Wolf, who is brilliant and fantastic, and I love that you came back as Sutek, my man. Absolutely brilliant. So terrifying, really creepy, very claustrophobic feel. You really get the tension, especially in the second part in the Satan Pit, when they're all trying to escape a now possessed army of Ood, and they're crawling through the ventilation system, and they're, you know, being chased. It is terrifying, but it is gripping at the same time. Really, really like it. The only thing I do have a bit of a thing about is the lovey-dovey stuff, you know, kicking up with the 10th Doctor and Rose, which was a bit of a negative for me in Season 2. But overall, I really like The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. I've watched it many, many times. So, you know, it had to make it onto this top 10 list. And that's why it's at number 6 on the list. Breaking into the top 5 now, we've got what actually was my very first ever modern series story. Yeah, this was the first one I started on, and what a story to start on. I'm talking about The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances from the very first series of Modern Who, starring Christopher Eccleston as the 9th Doctor. Oh my goodness. How on earth is this story so terrifying? It is literally a child with a gas mask on saying, "Are you my mummy?" and "mummy." How can you make that terrifying? Well, it was done and it terrified me for weeks. But yeah, it was a fantastic story, set during World War II. Brilliant. The Doctor and Rose land during World War II to find that something's not quite right. There's this mysterious woman who's searching for her brother. You've got the TARDIS phone mysteriously starting to ring. There's lots of little mysteries going on. This mysterious character known as Captain Jack Harkness. This was John Barrowman's first story in Modern Who, and obviously everyone knows the story of Captain Jack, who went on with Torchwood in the series, who came all the way back into the Jodie Whittaker era. So Captain Jack was a huge character back then. Fantastic job John Barrowman does, really brings a bit of comedy to it, and I think the Ninth Doctor, Rose and Jack is a really good TARDIS team, if I'm honest. Really like that he stayed for the rest of the series. So he was really, really good. Like I said, the young little boy who had the gas mask on, terrifying, It was a very claustrophobic episode again, and I like that. They know how to handle horror in Doctor Who. Scary, simple thing like a gas mask or a shadow or something like that. Set them in a claustrophobic area, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a factory, whether it's a library, somewhere tightly packed where no one can escape and there's little corridors. Boom, you've got a solid story there. I really, really like it, and a fantastic message at the end with the Ninth Doctor, who's obviously just survived the Time War, seen so much death and destruction, and he feels like he has to save everybody. And that, the line, "just this once, Rose, everybody lives," I think is a brilliant thing to say and a brilliant line. And the Doctor literally does save everybody in the story, and that is so sweet as well. And I love it. I absolutely love the story. It is fantastic. Terrifying, yes. Brilliant, yes. Have I watched it a billion times? Yes. Will I continue to watch it? Yes, of course. So yes, breaking into the top 5, it had to be The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances. In at number 4 then is my favourite 10th Doctor story of all time. Hands down, the one I've watched the most, has the best story arc. Really shows the 10th Doctor being both heroic but also has that manipulative, edgy side to him, that dark nature to him that's still lingering from the Time War, which I think is really, really cool. What am I talking about? Well, obviously I'm talking about the Waters of Mars during the 10th Doctor Complete Specials era. So just before the end of time, right towards the end of his first run. I know, David Tennant's first run as the Doctor. It's mad to say that, isn't it? He will knock 4 times and we get a free knock in this story. But you've got the villain of the Flood, this creature that lives in the water, and if you touch the water, drink the water, even get a drop on you, it converts you into this like zombie creature with white spaced out eyes, cracks around your mouth, oozing water, squirting water from your hands. It is terrifying. And they have this terrifying screech. Their mouths are all blacked out, so you can't really see anything. It's almost like a hose pipe that comes out of their mouth. It is scary, terrifying. And again, claustrophobic feel on this old Martian base, which is really, really good. However, I'm not going to lie, as a classic Whovian, Waters of Mars, really? Set on Mars? Why wasn't this an Ice Warrior story? But this ends like the Time Lord Victorious arc, where the Doctor finally realises, hey, I'm the last of the Time Lords, so if I want to change history, who's going to stop me really? No one's going to tell me what to do. So he tries to do his best to save the people who were apparently doomed to die. And so by taking matters into his own hands, he changes the history. And Adelaide Brooke, the woman that he does save, isn't very happy that the Doctor's playing God, and so takes matters into her own hands, and so then changes history again. So the Doctor's sort of messed things up big time, and realising that he's taken it too far, realising he needs someone with him, a friend. Because in the very next story, he goes to find Wilfred. But yeah, it is a really good story. And obviously, in recent stories in Shooty, we had like... I'm trying to think which story it was now. I want to say it was in the most recent series. Was it episode 2 or 3 where we had this... I think it was episode 3, The Well, maybe... Oh no, episode 1, The Robot Revolution, where we had this little cleaning robot that would constantly go around saying about clean, clean, or whatever it was. Obviously, we had the original thing of that with Gadget in Waters of Mars. Loved Gadget, fantastic, love it. Brilliant character. I love that the Doctor tricked him out and zoomed off in order to get away from the Flood. Really, really good. And some good speeches as well. The Doctor finally realising that his time has come and he might have gone a bit too far. Fantastic, really good, really shows everything that David Tennant is capable of and everything that the 10th Doctor was capable of. So that's why it had to make it in the top 5, and that's why it's at number 4 on my list. Coming in, taking the bronze medal, the first podium spot, goes to another story from Christopher Eccleston's first series, the series finale, Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways. Need I say more? This story is fantastic. The first regeneration story of Modern Who, so introducing the concept to a new audience. They explain it really well. You know, the 9th Doctor's come on a proper journey. He started out practically as still the War Doctor, not really caring much about life. You're not caring if there was casualties along the way. As long as he saved the majority, you know, he was happy. You know, he wasn't very emotional, you know. Whereas now he starts to get his, like, doctorish nature back now by this point, you know, where he considers every life important, you know, and he'll do right by everybody. So it's good that he has that sort of arc. The Daleks as well, returning in the finale, was really, really good. Claustrophobic feel again, people, in this Satellite 5, which was in a previous story earlier in the season, The Long Game, and this two-parter was the results of the actions of that, so showing that the Doctor had an impact on a future story, which was really, really good. Interesting thing to do there, RTD. Really, really good. And like I said, this was a finale for a lot of people. The final story of Christopher Eccleston, who goes out with a bang. He's brilliant, fantastic. Also was the last story for Captain Jack Harkness as part of the TARDIS team, but he does appear then 2 seasons later in Series 3, does return. Yeah, and you know, it was just an end of an era for a lot of people. And this was my first regeneration story. Definitely wasn't my first Doctor Who story, because I'd seen lots of classic Who before that, so I knew about regeneration, but I'd never actually watched a regeneration story. So as my first, it was interesting to see the way it happened. The Daleks were done brilliantly. I loved the Emperor Dalek. I thought he was brilliant, that booming voice. I just wish he did a little bit more. He was practically just there for, like, set dressing almost. He just stood there with a big booming voice and didn't really do anything, you know? But the amount of Daleks and saucers were unbelievable. I love it. And in part 1 of the story, the Bad Wolf part, getting to see the different games of the Weakest Link and the Big Brother house. Seeing the Doctor in the Big Brother house was hilarious. You know, like a Trini and Susanna dress-up thing with androids. You know, with Captain Jack Harkness was brilliant. It was a fun story, the first part. And then obviously the serious nature then of the second part. Fantastic story. Easy, like 8 or 9 out of 10 for me. Solid season finale. And that's why it's well deserving of a podium spot. Coming in at number 3 on my list. Taking the silver medal on my list is the season 10 finale, Willed Enough in Time, and the Doctor Falls. Yes, Peter Capaldi, my favourite Modern Who Doctor. I love Peter Capaldi. He does a fantastic job. Has my favourite TARDIS team of the 12th Doctor, Bill and Nardole. Phil Mackey and Matt Lucas are fantastic. And also you got the added bonus of this being the first and truly only on-screen multi-master story with Michelle Gomez's Missy teaming up with John Sims' Master, which I wish they hadn't spoiled in a coming soon trailer for season 10 earlier in the season. They should have kept that a secret, because this would have been one of the best comebacks and reveals of all time, because otherwise you wouldn't expect it, especially after so long. Like at that point, John Sim had been off screen as the Master for over 7 years. But it was absolutely brilliant. The return of the Mondasian Cybermen. And if you've seen my review video, or sorry, top 10 list of best classic Who stories, you know that the 10th Planet made it as an honourable mention. I love the Mondasian Cybermen, and I love their design. So to see them come back, I know it was a dream of Capaldi to face against the Mondasian Cybermen, and he got his wish, and it was brilliant. Fantastic story. You know, you get, it's almost like a multi-Cybermen-ish story as well, because you don't just get the Mondasians, but you also get the parallel universe Cybermen. You also then get the upgraded ones that the Matt Smith era had and the early Capaldi era had. You know, so you get different versions of the Cybermen, which is nice. References galore. You know, everyone departs in this story, apart from obviously the Doctor, but he does start to regenerate. But this is the last appearance of Michelle Gomez's Missy, John Sims' Master. Phil Mackey as Bill does leave technically in the story, but she does come back in the next story. Same as Matt Lucas's Nardole. They do come back in Capaldi's final, but as constant companions, this is it for them. But yeah, it is really, really good and has an amazing cliffhanger where the 12th Doctor bumps into his first incarnation at the South Pole where the 10th planet took place. So quite funny how you have a Mondasian Cybermen story connecting to a Mondasian Cybermen story. Really, really interesting and really, really good. I love it. And the first part as well, well enough in time, building up the tension of the Cybermen, getting to see the slow progression of how people are getting turned into these creatures and how Bill is tricked into thinking she has a friend, but it turns out to be the Master in disguise. Brilliant. I love it. Fantastic. Definitely my favourite 12th Doctor story, hands down, and my favourite Cyberman story of Modern Who. So that's why it comes in at number 2 on my list. Finally, the gold medal has to go to Season 1, Episode 6, titled Dalek. It is a fantastic story for Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper. Really, really, really good. You know, one Dalek trapped inside this base filled with all alien tech being experimented on. The Doctor's a survivor from the Time War. This Dalek is supposed to be the last Dalek in existence. They just have a final confrontation. The emotions are high in this story for both the Dalek and the Doctor, which is really, really interesting. And it is just fantastic and it's tense. And again, I've used this all video, but I can't help it because I love it when they do this. It's really tense and scary because it has a claustrophobic feel because they're tight corridors, narrow staircases, dark rooms, and you've got one Dalek that's chasing down everyone and killing everyone on sight with no mercy at all. It is unbelievable. Nice little cameo from the classic series Cyberman at the start of the episode as well. It's in Henry Van Statten's museum, the Cyberman head. I think it's a Cyberman head from Tom Baker's Revenge of the Cyberman, either that or The Invasion. It's got that sort of design to it, but really, really good. I love it. Fantastic. But yeah, I love in particular the interrogation scene between the Doctor and the Dalek, where the Doctor, you know, cannot believe that there's an actual Dalek. And when he realises there's a Dalek in the room, at the start, he's terrified. You see the fear. He's like, let me out of this room, let me out. And the Dalek's screaming, exterminate. But when the Doctor realises his weapon's damaged, the Doctor twists it round and starts mocking the Dalek. You know, you can see the hatred there for both of them, but realising that all they have left is each other. And the Dalek trying to say that you're the same as me. The Doctor being like, no, no, I'm not. You know, it's really, really interesting and really, really good. Definitely worth a watch. Even if you're not a Doctor Who fan, if you're a fan of sci-fi or scary stuff, I think Dalek is a good story to watch. But yeah, it is really, really good. And sweet at the end as well, because the Dalek gets a bit of humanity because Rose Tyler touched it and it absorbed her energy. And so he ends up sacrificing himself as well. Which, you know, is a sweet moment. And this is the first time the Doctor sort of starts his shift in his character arc where he lets the Dalek live at the end and shows mercy and, you know, he's getting his humanity back a little bit. So, yeah, really, really good. Really solid story. I've watched this story more times than I could even count because it is such an easy watch with such good speeches, such good character. Henry Van Statten as an extra villain, he's brilliant. He is brilliant. He's one of those like villains that you love to hate. And he gets his comeuppance at the end, which is brilliant. But yeah, I highly recommend Dalek, and that's why it wins for me as my favourite and the best modern Doctor Who story, at least in my personal opinion. But that is going to be it for my list ranking the top 10 best modern Doctor Who stories in my personal opinion. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, please like it by giving it a thumbs up and comment down below your thoughts on this list and your thoughts on modern Doctor Who in general. What would your list be if it's not similar to this one? And subscribe if you are new. So now we've done the best list. We've obviously got one more video in this series, so stay tuned because in the future I will do the fourth and final video in this series where I'll go over my top 10 worst modern Doctor Who stories. This is the Nerdy Grail signing off. I hope you've had an amazing day and I'll see you all next time. Bye for now, everyone.